Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight's lesson is a continuation of volume, but instead of volume of rectangular prisms, we're going to be doing volume of three-dimensional figures. So that is our goal. We're still going to be using the same formulas, but our goal is to find volume of 3D figures using formulas. We don't have any new vocabulary. We don't really have any new notes either, but we are going to just review our notes prior. So we had two formulas that we've been using for volume. The first formula we've been using is called base times height. And when we've been writing this, we've been saying B times H. Okay, and remember, base is the area of the base. So that's formula one. And our second formula is length times width times height. And we've been saying that is volume equals length times width times height. Okay, the important thing to know about those two formulas is those are only good for rectangular prisms. I couldn't find the volume of some weird shape or of a sphere, or it's specific to volume of rectangular prisms. Okay, so our steps today are we're first going to separate your 3D figure into rectangular prisms. And this is necessary because the formulas only work for rectangular prisms. So we're going to get shapes that are not rectangular prisms, and we're going to have to break them apart into prisms so we can use our formulas that we've become mastered so far. Okay, our next step is we're going to label them, meaning our prisms, and we're just going to label them 1, 2, we might even need a 3, so on. We're going to label them when we break them apart or separate them. Then we're going to find the volume of each one using a formula. And we have two choices for our formulas. And then our final step is we're going to add your answers together to get your final answer. So if you kind of have mastered the last few lessons, this one's just going to be taking that a tiny step farther. Okay, so what does this look like? All right, well, here's my first problem that I'm going to do, and I'm going to get my steps kind of there to refer back to. So if you notice, this is not a rectangular prism. We talked a lot about a rectangular prism is a very fancy math word for a box. If you look closely, this pretty much looks like there's a box with a box on top. But as a whole, it is not a box because of this chunk that's missing. So since it's not a box as a whole, we're going to have to separate it into rectangular prisms. Okay, it's pretty clear how I would separate it. I would say this looks like a box, and then this bottom one looks like a box. So that's all step one is break it apart into two prisms or two boxes. Okay, my next step says I'm going to label them. So I'm going to call this box 1 and that box 2, or prism 1 and prism 2. Okay, my next step is I'm going to find the volume of each one using a formula. So I said a formula because you're kind of welcome to use whatever you feel will work best for this problem. Okay, so I'm going to first find the volume of box or prism 1. So I always start with my formula. Length times width times height. Okay, if I notice the length, they gave it to me up here. Normally I like to see it down here, but it's the same thing. If that's 6, that line has to be 6, and that line also has to be 6. So I know 6 is my length. Okay, we've kind of realized our width is this number, this slanted, and notice they didn't give it to me. But what they did give me is a 3 here. And if I look closely, this box looks like it's as wide as the bottom box, which means that my top box must have a width of 3 also. And remember, my height is always my straight up down number. So my height is 5. So I have 18 times 5. And if you can't do this in your head, then you just find some space to do some side work. So 18 times 5, 5 times 8 is 40, 5 times 1 is 5, plus that 4 is 90. Okay, so my first box has a volume of 90 centimeters cubed. That's box 1. I also need to find the volume of this box. So volume, I'm going to use my same formula just because I think that that one works best for these. So my length is 8, my width is 3, and my height is 5 again. So I'm getting 8 times 3 times 5, 24 times 5. And again, that's past what I could do in my head. So I'm just going to find some spot to do some side work. And I am getting 120. So the volume of my second box is 120 centimeters cubed. Okay, so that was step 3. That's where most of my work is. Find the volume of each rectangular prism using a formula. Now I'm just going to add my answers together. So if this one's volume's 90 and this one's volume's 120, the volume of both of them would be 90 plus 120. So 90 plus 120, and I'm getting 210 centimeters cubed. That is my answer for my first problem. Okay, I'm going to try another one using my same steps. The second problem, they kind of set it up a little differently. So this one, they gave me a box with pictures, but I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to separate it into rectangular prisms. Now there's kind of, when I look at this, I see two different ways. I could take this top part off and say I have a big bottom and this top part. Or I could say, oh, I have this and this. So I kind of am seeing how I could separate it different ways. There's really not a right or a wrong way. Just do what works best for you. So I'm going to say that this is one box and then this is one box. So I'm going to imagine two kind of put together. Okay, so step 2 is I'm going to label them. So I have 1 and 2. Okay, and then I'm going to find the volume of each of them. So my first one, I'm going to use this formula. Okay, my length is 2. My width is, it goes back 1, and you could count them. This box is 1, 2, 3, 4. And my height, it's 1, 2, 3 tall. So I am saying my first one is 24. Now this didn't tell me a measurement, so I'm assuming I'm just going to use units cubed. So I could say 24 units cubed, excuse me, or I could also say 24 cubic units. Okay, my second box, say length times width times height, is what volume equals. This time my length is 2. My width is 4 again, but this time my height is only 1. So I'm getting 8 times 1 is 8. So box 2 is 8 cubic units. Okay, and my final step is, if box 1 is 24, box 2 is 8, what is the whole shape? Well, 24 plus 8 is 32 cubic units. Oh, sorry, you didn't see that. And I am done. Okay, so again, if you mastered volume, this is really just a tiny little step up. Okay, let's try one together. So here's my shape. The way I'm seeing this shape is they kind of took this long skinny one and pushed it up against this long taller one. So I would break it up as saying I have this one in the front and then I have this one in the back. I'm kind of seeing it like that. So I could call that one my first one and my second one. Okay, so let's find the volume of our first shape. So I'm going to set up my formula because I always start with a formula. Okay, my length of this top shape is 12. My width right here says it's 4. And my height is 4. So I'm getting 48 times 4, which I can't do in my head. So let's find some space to work that out. And I'm now getting 192. And this one has a measurement of feet, so it's 192 feet cubed is my first volume. Okay, my second volume, I'm going to start with my formula. And my length, again, they don't really give it to me, but if I see the 12 up here, I realize that this is the same length. They do give me a width right here, it's 2. And then they do give me a height right here, which is also 2. So I'm getting 24 times 2 is 48 feet cubed. But remember, that's only for this box. So if I want to find the volume of them together, of the whole shape, all I have to do is add them. And I am getting 240 feet cubed. Okay, so let's try one more together. Okay, so my last one with you, again, I see this two ways. I see that this piece was set on top of this piece, or this piece was pushed up against this piece. It doesn't matter. We're gonna do it together, and we're just gonna say that that was set on top of this one. So I'm gonna break it up that way. Okay, so my first volume, I'm gonna say length times width times height. The length is 3, the height is 3, and the width is 3 and the height, because that's a perfect cube. So I'm getting 9 times 3, I'm getting 27. And they told me it's millimeters. So I know it's 27 millimeters cubed. And my bottom, again, we always start with a formula. So my length is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My width is also 3 and my height is also 3. So I'm getting 18 times 3, which is 54. And you could work that out if you needed to, which is millimeters cubed. Okay, but this is only for this one and this is only for this one. They want the total volume, which means I need to add those two numbers together. So 27 plus 54 is 7 plus 4 is 11, 1, 2, and that is 81 millimeters cubed. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you have 2 problems to attack on your own and then rate yourself, and then we will be practicing this tomorrow and for a few days. Have a nice evening. Good night.